The sentence and reasons are also ready. Nachibuka Janat was indicted for murder contrary to sections 188 and 189 of the Penal Code Act. The charges were later reduced to manslaughter contrary to sections 187 and 190 of the Penal Code Act. She voluntarily and willingly pleaded guilty to the lesser charge after fully understanding the charge, the particulars, and the consequences of her plea of guilty. She admitted the facts of the case that led to her conviction, hence this ruling on sentence and reasons. Manslaughter has a maximum sentence of imprisonment for life as prescribed under section 190 of the Penal Code Act. The Constitution Sentencing Guidelines for Courts of Judicature, Practice Directions 2013, Part 2 of the third schedule sets 15 years of imprisonment as the starting point, with a sentencing range of between 3 years to imprisonment for life. A wide range of circumstances under which the crime may be committed. It ranges from a joke gone badly, failure to control a fit of anger or rage, to that close to murder. And that which is close to murder. In the instant case, court was informed the convict was a wife to the deceased, and the two had domestic issues which usually resulted into quarrels and fights. That on the fateful date of 20th July 2020, they two started quarreling in the middle of the night because the accused made phone calls that annoyed the deceased, which made him grab the phone and hit it down. They quarreled throughout the night, which led the accused to pick a knife and stabbed the deceased on the neck, leading to his death. The neighbors who were concerned with the scuffle went in to intervene, but the deceased was already fatally stabbed. He died of hemorrhagic shock following that sharp force trauma. The accused, now convict, was examined on the same day, 20th July 2020, and found with wounds and mild tenderness.
Avunaani bankati yasimisibwa omusango bamutwera ku lunaku lwe lumu olwo nga 2/2020 n'asangibwa ng'alina ebiwundu n'obulumi.
What is a wound in Luganda?
Yasangibwa ng'alina ebisago n'obulumi.
A wound is defined as an injury to the body from violence, accident, or surgery that typically involves laceration or breaking of a membrane, such as the skin, and usually damage to underlying tissues. The wounds were a result of a domestic violence and or a fight that fateful night. This case is a classic example of family and domestic violence where the couple experienced abusive behaviors, where usually one individual gains power over another. This kind of physical violence is unfortunately on the increase in Uganda, with negative consequences as the battered women end up using excessive force to defend themselves. In Alochitas, the land senior state attorney informed court that she was a first offender much as she committed the unlawful act. She prayed for an appropriate sentence. Counsel Sheila Chihumulo for the convict prayed for a lenient sentence on the grounds that she was a first offender and very remorseful. She's the only surviving parent for her child. The convict herself asked court and the family of the deceased to forgive her. By the time the neighbors came in to intervene, the fight had become savagely violent. Certainly the fight must have been brutal, which left the deceased with a stab fatal wound on the neck, while the convict had wounds on her body. The public out there should learn that domestic violence is primitive and has no room in this modern era. If two people discover they are incompatible and cannot live together harmoniously, the ideal thing to do is to give each other space rather than become combatants or boxers without a referee, because there can never be rules that govern the savage fight among spouses.
asala kwanagana okwo kwebabeeramu kubanga tewali mateeka gagobererwa mu kwanagana okwo.
That is why such fights end up in loss of life with far-reaching consequences.
Yensonga lwaki okwanagana okwo kumaliza nga kulimu omuntu afudde n'ebivamu ebirala.
A spouse dies and the other ends up in custody, leaving the children and relatives suffering, and at times creating enmity between the two families in love.
Omu ku abo afumba ayinza okufa, omu n'amaliriza ng'ali mu kkomera ne baleka abaana n'ab'enganda zaabwe nga babonaabona ne bateekawo n'obutafaakagana wakati w'abafamilies ebbiri.
These should be avoided at all costs.
Kirina okwewalibwa mu nkola yonna.
The convict's now 6-year-old child has lived without a parent since the mother was arrested. She was first remanded on 5th of August 2020.
Eyasinze omusango eyalina omwana w'emyaka 6 abaddewo nga talina muzadde okuba we yakwatibwa ng'asindikwa kwa rimanda nga 5 Ogw'omunaana 2020.
I have considered both submissions in allocutus and mitigation.
Tunye ku nsonga zonna ezaagala omwala gavumenti ne bweyaba asinze omusango.
I'm inclined to think that the deceased provoked the convict into stabbing him as he battered her before inflicting injury and suffering unto her before she stabbed him.
Mpaliriza ndeetedde okulowooza nti omugenzi yasinze omusango ekyamuviirako okumutumita ekiso nga tanaba kumutuusaako obusago.
The convict never planned to kill her husband on that fateful day.
Yasinze omusango teyeetegekera kutta bbaawe ku lunaku olwo.
It is apparent that she will be haunted for the rest of her life by this unfortunate death.
Ajja kuba abonaaba n'ekikolwa kye eky'okutta bbaawe obulamu bwe bwonna.
The act of causing death by stabbing her husband erased all the good things they shared together and the good times they had together before they turned their house into a battlefield.
Ekikolwa ekyo eky'okutta bbaawe ng'ayita mu kumita akambi kyasangula ebintu byonna ebingi baali bagabana wakati waabwe.
This should be a lesson to all humanity that love should never be mixed with hatred.
Kirina kuba kyakuyiga eri abantu bonna nti omukwano tetulina kugattibwamu bukyayi.
This was the most tragic way of ending their love story.
Eno yali enkola embi nnyo eyali yasanyawo omukwano gwe baali balina.
Nevertheless, the child who is innocent does not deserve to suffer.
Naye era omwana eyali talina musango teyeetaaga kubonaabona.
It is her constitutional right to be raised by her surviving parent.
Ye musemateeka ye okuba nti akozibwa muzadde waaliwo.
The convict has been in custody for 3 years and 7 months. That was as per 13th of March, when I was supposed to have read this ruling.
Eyasinze omusango abadde mu kkomera kumala myaka 3 n'emyezi 7 tubadde okuba 13 Ogw'okusatu.
Considering the unfortunate circumstances of this case, she is sentenced to 3 years, 7 months and 8 days, which period she has already served on a pre-trial remand. She should be released unless lawfully held on other charges so that she goes and looks after her child. Mwe abasajja n'abakyala abali mu kkooti temulwanagana. When you fight and you end up killing each other, it does not do you any good, does not do your family any good. But remember, life is precious. She killed her husband, but there is a child. So should we keep her in, or she has to go and look after her child? If you keep beating women, if you keep assaulting women, they develop a syndrome which they call battered woman syndrome, and they can become very violent. In a single blow, they can kill someone. The same with women. If a woman bothers the husband too much, in a single blow, the man can also kill. So let's avoid violence in our homes because we know that it has consequences. The Constitution.